There are 8 billion people in the world, and sometimes we feel like we're responsible for all of them. This is the curse of social media. We know everything. We see a world on fire, and we want to fix it, but we can't. Not all of it. We need to resist the urge to take it all on, and instead do our part. Our 1/8 billionth share. This wisdom comes courtesy of Nell Derick Debevoise, today's guest on the DesuckifyWork Podcast. Nell is a speaker, coach, facilitator, advisor, and author who focuses on helping people and organizations connect to their purpose. Now, that word's been overused and thoroughly abused in recent years, especially in advertising and marketing. But we're not talking about purpose washing here. We're talking about aligning your investments in time, energy, attention, and money with your desired outcomes. It's shocking how bad most of us are at this. But the good news is we can get better, fast. We can work with Nell's Impact Dashboard tool to quickly assess how and where we're spending our time and energy. We can compare those results with our stated purpose. Are we doing things that will create the results we say we want? And we can make changes, either to the actions we take or to the outcomes we want, to bring things into alignment. Now, wouldn't it be nice to land in that sweet spot where most of the things we do actually have an impact on the things we want for ourselves, our workplaces, and the world? Listen to Nell, and you'll get there a lot sooner than you think. Okay, Nell Derick Debevoise, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
Thank you, TJ. So glad to be here.
I'm very glad to have you here. I think we'll get into a few good things, but I know your big focus is around the idea of purpose at work. And I think that's one that's a lot of people are thinking about, wondering about. Some people are talking about it and maybe not quite framing it in the right way. I think there's some buzziness around that term that occasionally distorts its at best meaning. And I think you can help us get to the heart of what a really purposeful work life can look like. So thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's my purpose to help depressurize purpose and clarify it and make it more actionable is one of my big things. So super happy to do that with you.
That I love. I think that's like one of the hardest things about anything when we, discuss things on this show or we read things or we hear things. It's like, now what? So I think we can get into some of the now what, which will be really helpful.
Totally.
Before we do that, I'd love to give you a chance just to describe a little bit about yourself. What are you doing for work right now and how did you come to be doing it?
Yeah, totally. So I'm a speaker, an author, a coach, a facilitator, which are all paths toward the same goal of really helping people understand what I refer to as their 1/8 billionth. So this notion that there are about 8 billion of us banging around on the planet, and there are some really massive, like existential challenges, right? Really gnarly stuff that we're facing these days, economically, sociopolitically, health-wise, on and on and on, as well as some amazing opportunity for sure. It's an amazing time to be alive, as we heard in Hamilton. And so my work is really all about just finding your 1/8 billionth. So teeny portion of all of that work to be done, because that's all you need to do, right? If we all got into that and did that little bit, the mosaic comes together and it's a beautifully healed world. And when we don't focus and get so specific about what we're good at, what we're positioned to do, what actually fills us up as we exert effort to do it, then we get burnt out, we get frustrated, we get overwhelmed, we get depressed, we get anxious because look out there at all those things, right? But when we can get clear about our circle of influence rather than the huge circle of concern that we might have.
Yes.
And really, really niche up into the specific investments that we can make of our time, our energy, our attention, and our money all throughout our work and life in a very
Mhm.
holistic way, it's magic because it's actually really energizing, right?
Yeah.
Even though we are contributing and delivering great work. So
Mm.
that's the spiel, that's the work. And if you want some backstory, happy to do that. But
Oh,
I'll stop.
I love that, and we may get into some backstory, but I think what jumped out at me there's two things. I love the way you frame it as the 1/8 billionth, because I think maybe it's particularly driven by social media that the full 8 billion feels right in front of us, right? We see and know and feel everything, and therefore, yeah, as good humans, we think I want to fix as much as that as I can, but how in the world do I do it? So I love that
Yeah.
you're giving people, one, permission to not take all of it on. It's not all on any one of us. And then two, helping people get to that focus point of like, what is my slice? What is my piece that is both achievable by me based on what I love and what I'm skilled at? And I love that notion of the sort of like the energizing part of that. And we can maybe dive into that a bit later. But I think a lot of times we're not always aware of what are those things that are sucking our energy versus the things that are actually giving us energy. And so I think we can talk a little bit more about that too. Before we go too further deep, I always like to ask, and I have a feeling it plays a decent role in your life, but what role does work play in your life for you?
Mm, I mean, yeah, it is my identity
Yeah.
completely.
Mm-hmm.
And I have come to evolve very uh, firm, intentional, not firm, but intentional boundaries
Mm.
around work and life because this framework that has emerged from my work with other people, but also very personally with my own ups and downs of
Mm-hmm.
how to realize or activate this purpose. I need and want big investment in myself
Mm-hmm.
well-being, my emotional, spiritual, physical,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm at a point right now where I have probably, give or take, 20 hours a week of firm commitment to self investment.
Mm.
To say nothing of a full 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Although I'm doing some iron supplements for anemia, and actually it's more like 7.5 is working. So that's a
Okay.
work in
That's
progress.
good.
But
That's good.
exercise, meditation, journaling, continuous learning and education, and spiritual listening,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, really 20 hours a week. So
That's
that's
great.
like a not so part-time job that I
Mm-hmm.
need to maintain the energy, the creativity,
Mm-hmm.
the patience, the generosity
Yeah.
that it takes to do my work.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
To say nothing of a family life that's very active. I don't have biological children, but I have three fabulous adult stepchildren and a
Mm-hmm.
half sister who's actually younger than my stepchildren in a generational twist.
Yeah.
And a husband who I love, and a mom who is now widowed and I love and close to.
Mm.
So, really committed and
Yeah.
love doing things there. So, all of those things for me, because my work is so aligned and purposeful, I do my family things in the lens of my purpose.
Mm.
And so I actually feel and see synergy and overlap and enhancement of my work through that
Wow.
time, but
Mm-hmm.
it certainly is not what I'm being paid for.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. But I imagine a few people listening are going, I want that. Meaning,
Mm,
because it's hard, and I'm not dismissing that. I'm sure it's been hard for you to create that for yourself. It's not easy. But when you talk about creating those boundaries, because I think this notion of work being a significant part of our identity is going to relate to a lot of people. But I think also people who feel that may also get to a space of, wow, those boundaries can just be demolished really quickly, because it's like you are getting energized and you're excited about the work, and then you just push everything aside. So what have you been able to do to create that space for yourself, to have those 20 hours, to have the family time and all of that? Is there anything that you found really works well for you?
Yeah, it really does, at the risk of being a broken record, right? But it really does come down to purpose. It comes down to intentionality about the
Hmm.
outcomes that I want to have in
Mm.
my three dimensions, which are the
Yeah.
me, right? Myself as
Mhm.
an individual, complete, whole human, my
Mhm.
we, which includes my team,
Mhm.
extended as that may be, my family, community, and
Mhm.
then the world, right? The broader communities around that. And
Mm.
so the intentionality is the important piece. And I think some people listening, they want that, especially those of us who are more solopreneurs or entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I would say that, purpose is not one size fits all. And so I
Mhm.
think it actually can be very helpful to keep firm boundaries. Whereas I say I have real, porousness and
Mhm.
integration between work and life. I think actually some people do very well and are served well by having firm boundaries and saying, this is a hobby, this is
Mhm.
family time, and it has nothing to do with the fact
Yeah.
that I'm CFO at a green energy company, right? That's
Mhm.
great. I'm proud of it. It pays the bills. It's intellectually
Mhm.
stimulating. It is linked to my purpose somehow. And when I am a dad raising strong, confident young girls,
Mhm.
I just want to be there and I'm not
Mm.
CFO.
Yeah.
So I think there can actually be health in that. And then it just comes down to tactics, right? Which some of my hacks and tips and tricks are calendar blocking for sure,
Mhm.
and like really regular calendar jiggering. My
Mm.
workouts are all on my calendar, as are
Mhm.
my indulge dates, which are
Yeah.
5 to 15 minutes to just look at the sky.
Yeah.
Family time to pack, because I just live and die by my calendar. And so at
Mhm.
least once a day, at least, I
Mhm.
am kind of reality checking what's happening later
Mm.
today. Where is this? Where is it going to go? What got squeezed out? How's next week? So
Yeah.
for me, that works.
Mm.
And then the other piece that, I think is somewhat universally human is, we're essentially monkeys. And so bananas work. And so whatever your banana is, I have a few kind of apps. I have a spreadsheet that I track on a weekly basis to just really hold myself accountable of, did I, resist an
Mhm.
alcoholic drink at least 4 nights this week?
Yeah.
Did I meditate today? And how is that
Mhm.
217-day streak going?
Mhm.
So some of those just very simple endorphin releases of the
Mhm.
reward of
Yeah.
building those habits that we say we want to have. And yet, right, for me, that has been critical. And again, a little bit one size fits all, but we are all driven by endorphins. And so
Mhm.
having some version of that, I think, is an important piece of the story.
Yeah, I can see that. I think the reward system is real, and it does seem to help. I think the idea of intentionality is great. It's sort of so easy to have months and even years go by where you're not being all that intentional and you're just swept up in whatever you're swept up in, and that's
Mm,
you know probably again just baked into us as our pseudo monkey existence is. But I think taking just a little time at the start to think, okay, how can I be a little more intentional? Can I start to block my calendar? Can I either draw those hard lines as boundaries or decide like, no, I need them to be a little more porous, and here's what I get from that. But I'm choosing to do that rather than it just all blurring together through
exactly.
inattention. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that.
Exactly.
Well, I know, you focus a lot on purpose and bringing purpose to work. And so you're obviously connecting with a lot of folks through your work and maybe
Mhm.
observing and noticing the state of work. And I'm curious
Mm,
what
mm.
your take, I always like to kind of the suck meter, that I think about, if it's, completely quiet, everything's great, everything's wonderful, to like, a 5 alarm fire. Where is the state of work from your observation right now?
Like 4.2 alarms.
Mm, yeah. What are you seeing?
So I've been a kind of thesis has been coming together. This conversation is really well timed over the last few weeks of some deep reading, thinking, noodling, conversing that I've been doing with people.
Mm-hmm.
So let me lay it out for you. What I see is that we had come out of the industrial era and revolution, right? And we were in this kind of information work, knowledge era.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, right? So things were shifting for sure, a
Yeah.
lot.
Mm-hmm.
Generations, sociopolitical, economic, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then COVID happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we froze. And so two things happened. We had time to look around and space, right? We weren't just on that treadmill of commute to meeting, to business, to work, to cocktails, which I lived in Manhattan, right, for 10 years. And it is full on there as much as anywhere else in the world, for sure.
Yeah.
So we were stopped in our tracks at home with family, friends, you know, and we were at existential risk of dying, no matter, of course, unfairly, depending on race and ethnic background and identity and socioeconomics, that is real. And to some extent, humanly,
it could have taken
we were at risk.
Anybody. Yeah, agreed.
Correct. And so we were brought to our knees. And I think until now, I'll admit, was sort of like, yes, here's our moment, because a lot of people's purpose story is a tragedy, right?
Yeah.
They lose a loved one, they get they are diagnosed with a fatal terminal illness, they whatever, it's some lightning bolt wakes them up to realizing that they need to think differently. And so I was like, okay, we've collectively had that as humanity. What an opportunity. And indeed, I think you saw some of that. I saw some of that for sure. But what I've realized in the last few weeks and months is that actually, yes, that is true. And this 1-2 punch of frozen, stopped at home, cracked wide open, and then barraged with personal loss and racial violence and geopolitical war and economic uncertainty and organizational threat and competition. And yeah,
it's
at our most vulnerable and cracked open. And so the 4 alarms are because we are damaged.
Yeah.
We're collectively damaged, whether you're a CEO making 962 times more than your least paid employee and doing far too well than you should be for what you deliver, but you're worried about your employees and your business and the ability to keep them employed and the ability, or whether you're a mom of Black-skinned children who you worry about going to the grocery store because they might get shot, or whether you had family that was taken as a hostage or was killed as a patient in a Gaza hospital. Like everyone is damaged.
Yeah.
And the final piece of the alarm, and I'll stop this thesis that I've written for us, we're trying to just get back to normal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been, I think, as you lay it all out there, a lot of it is like stuff that's been somewhere in my brain, and some of it you're putting a finer point on, or even creating some new thinking. But all of it together is, that's the thing that I think nobody has been. I don't want to say nobody, because people are talking about things like wellness and mental health and all that kind of stuff, but like being as blunt about it as to say, like, as a society, as a people, we have been damaged. We have been, exposed. All of those nerve endings have been sort of, brought to the surface and are raw. And it is not as simple as declaring back to normal and expect us to do it. Some people are, I'm sure, are finding, easier than others, because it's just a whole bunch of reasons for that. But even the people who are doing the best are probably still struggling a bit, because they may not even recognize like that they were kind of like exposed in that way, and those nerve endings are still there, and nobody has kind of given us a clear path forward, right? What do we do? Because we don't have any easy examples. We've usually kind of just looked to some example, but we haven't had quite this mix combined with the exposure to all of it through the constant barrage of social media. So not only is all of this happening, because things have, obviously happened at global scale before, but our ability to be very aware of it, not simply in our own little world, but globally, it has to do some significant damage to our psyche and our ability to move through the world. So as you notice that, and you think about the work you're doing, and you've got this thesis going, what do you see as some possible ways forward for us?
Yeah. So the focus that we have, and that I really think is critical, is that we tend to skip a step in the efforts to heal this, right? I think you're right. I don't think we have fully acknowledged it, and implicitly or subconsciously or quietly, we know it's real, right? I mean, we're seeing it, we're feeling it. So it's just, we don't tend to take it head on or to say it so bluntly. But I think we know it's there. So we're trying, right? The wellness intent and the this and the that, right? But the step that almost everyone I see is skipping, certainly, especially on an organizational level, is the individual work, this individual clarity around that 1/8 billionth, right? And I don't say this to put the onus on the individual to fix ourselves, right? Because I absolutely think that there's collective responsibility in terms of policy, in a public sector way, So very specifically in the context of desuckifying work, organizations have an obligation and an interest in supporting the individual work of what matters to me as a human, what am I good at, what am I energized by, and how can I do that here at this workplace and in my broader life. And so companies don't need to fix it for people. They don't need to be their therapists or their families, but they do have an obligation and an interest. There is absolute return on this investment in a massive way. It is some of the lowest hanging fruit out there to support people to just do this individual work and reflection.
Yeah.
And I see when we get to do that with partners, it's magic, right? And we're picking up a stitch of, who were you as a kid? How are you now? What parts of your day are you energized by, right? We're starting there. And then we get back to, how does that fit into your team? And what about your community? What about your self-care? What about your family? We pull in all my 6 spheres of impact. And when companies are courageous enough to do that, and leaders are courageous enough to have that holistic conversation, it's not that they become, again, the therapist or the family or the everything, but they engage that human as a full human. And simply the gratitude that we see come out of that returns.
Right.
To say nothing of then the focus and the clarity and the motivation to do this part, right? Which is not anybody's whole day. And people aren't idiots. Even Gen Z, they're not idiots. They don't actually think that work is going to be their everything. But maybe somewhat ironically, by trying to just focus on the 8 hours or the 14 hours or the 4 hours that you're giving me, all the rest creeps in. Whereas if we're clear and we say, here's this, here, right? We map it on the impact dashboard, then we can cleanly come to the meeting, to the promotion conversation, to whatever it is, and get the thing done, because all this stuff out here is quieted and it has a place to be.
Wow. Yeah, I think that whole idea of helping people show up as full human beings, you talked about the Industrial Revolution, where maybe it's sort of like, that's where some of these habits started, where we sort of said, okay, you're showing up as some sliver of yourself who just does the thing and does the thing and does the thing. But where we are now, to say nothing of all of the just general human benefits of treating people like full human beings, like, why don't we want that? That's, I think, the resistance you sometimes see. I'm like, well, wouldn't you rather every person show up with everything that they have to offer, feeling the most energized, feeling the most connected to the people around them, feeling excited about taking all of that stuff that they have and funneling it into what you're trying to do, whatever your big mission is, as opposed to kind of having them siphon off parts of that and say, yeah, just work me shows up. And where work me gives you, it's good, but not great. And I think you called that the low hanging fruit. And what I wonder is, like, it certainly feels that way to me, but there's clearly some points of resistance to it, right? What do you hear the most when you're talking to somebody who's maybe a little skeptical, like, I don't know about this whole thing? What shows up for them as those points of resistance?
Yeah. So this is so important, right? This is kind of it when we look at this, because, a lot of this, people are like, well, yeah, that sounds great. Very few of us are kind of waking up in the morning wanting to burn more carbon or, win the misogyny battle or whatever. I really believe that. So in the book, I go through 3 pitfalls to this over and over for each sphere. And so I'll use that as a lens for this answer, because I think it helps to kind of bucket them. And they fall into the 3 dimensions: the me and the we and the world. So the me is merely inaction, right? It's just inertia. And again, we're all damaged. Your manager is damaged. The kid who works for you is damaged. The CEO is damaged. The chair of the board is damaged right now. And we are physical beings who are affected by the force of inertia. So in any given question, the likely response is the current status quo. Yeah.
I get that.
Period. Right. It's just simply true. And there are all kinds of good reasons for that, right? It's all of a sudden scary to ask about someone's weekend because, well, due to their gender or their sexual identity or their race or their geographic origin, all of a sudden that taps into a sensitive thing that you've now triggered, and they're now going to call HR. Ish, I mean, those stories are versions of real, but they're out there is the important thing. And so this inaction is a capital I. I think it's bigger than it has been in the past in some ways. The kind of organizational dynamic pitfall is shoulds. As a manager, I shouldn't chit chat with my employees. As a team, we should have weekly group meetings where we talk about our sales goals. I should be strong as a leader. I shouldn't share that my dog died. And so that, and we should ourselves, right? It's a we level thing, but it's not necessarily coming from someone else, right? It can be an internal self-shoulding.
Or even a perceived should.
A perceived should. Correct. Exactly. And then the third, similar but extended, is orthodoxy. And so this is even more kind of abstract, right? Out in that world dimension. And this is like really insidious, because I can't even say, who's he to should me? Or maybe I'm perceiving this should and it's not. This is just capital T truth. Leaders are tough. Work is done in person. On and on and on.
All of that stuff.
Right. And so, from what I see everything, all of the many obstacles, big, small, tactical, strategic, tend to fall into those buckets in my experience.
I can relate to most of those. I mean, I think the inertia thing is big. I mean, whether you're working in a company or working as more of a solopreneur, there's so many things that can kind of just freeze you in place. And then, the shoulds and the shouldn'ts and the perceived expectations on you from other people, from society, from, I worked in advertising. This is what you should do in advertising. This is what you shouldn't do. And you can get so kind of trapped in that.
Totally.
And I think what you're talking about and the work you're talking about feels like it can give you permission to put those aside and start to like listen to yourself, listen to each other truthfully. Like, what does she really believe? What does she really want? What do I really want? How can we both help each other in that?
Yeah.
What does, first of all, I want to come back and just say the name of your book going first, is something I want people to pay attention to, because I love that you have that book and you also have kind of a companion workbook with it as well.
Playbook.
Yeah, the playbook. I love that. And I think maybe coming to the playbook a little bit is how do we start to operationalize some of this stuff? You go from the, okay, I think I'm starting to get a handle on what my purpose is, and we can talk a little more in depth on that. But the idea that it becomes action. What are some of the things that you're seeing that people can do to make that part of who they are being, rather than simply what they wish for?
Yeah, totally. And I have no position on whether or not you need a purpose statement. So I spend like 3 paragraphs in the beginning of the book, and I have a template for a down and dirty purpose statement. And I'm like, if you don't have one and you feel like you need to, spend 8 minutes here, and then put it down and move on. Because for me, and I think, we all learn and think differently. So for some people, that's a really useful activity. And at some point in the journey, I agree, and we invest in it. But for other people, myself included, actually the bottom up, right? If you think of emergent strategy in business, emergent purpose is very powerful. And I think sometimes more appealing or feasible for people. So I've been thrilled to see a Forbes piece that I just published, recreating some of the content from the book about the ABCs of purpose, doing really well. It's really resonating with people and kind of catching on. So I can share that for show notes.
Yeah.
But the idea is ABCs. So awareness is the first step, right? And this is age old. Like, recognizing you have a problem is the first step, or just noticing where you are when you're on GPS. You start from, you are here, right? So you can't get directions unless you know where you are. And so just the awareness that you are an impactful human being with an evolutionary drive to contribute. Competition is not what we evolved for. Research, behavioral science studies do not line up with what economic theory would predict about competition. We actually are far more likely to cooperate, right? If you look at like the prisoner's dilemma as a research paradigm, over and over and over, the results are that we cooperate by default.
Interesting.
So there is some orthodoxy out there that is false. It is not capital T truth. It is countered by research, and yet it persists.
Yeah.
So A is just awareness that we are wired to collaborate. It's not woo-woo. It's not Gen Z. It's not millennial. It's not because I live on the coast and I drink green juice and do yoga. It is human.
Yeah. That makes sense.
That is step one, and that I only need to do my 1/8 billionth, right? So there's a bunch of awarenesses, but it's that world of awareness. And then the second is belief, which, the awarenesses I teach, that's what's in my book, that's what I talk about on stage, and a lot of other people do too. So there's a lot of places to find the awareness. The second piece of belief, no one can do for you. You just have to see all that awareness, see all that data, see all that research, and truly, in your heart and head, believe that this is true, that business can be a force for good, that your work can matter, that you will perform better if you see how your work matters. And then C is clarity, which leads to confidence, which leads to courage. And now we start overcoming some of those pitfalls, especially in action, right? But clarity is the first step. You've got to just see it, right? And it builds on awareness, but now it's clarity for me. So that's where the playbook comes in is, okay, great. We have these simple 6 spheres of impact. All of us have them. I've yet to find a human from 14 years old to 88 years old of all geographies and roles and stages who don't think about their investments in self, in family and friends, in their job, whether that's formal and paid or otherwise, in their workplace, whether that's an organization or an industry, their community, online, virtual, geographic, and their money. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money, but everyone's spending something, right? So just simple money. And so here are 6 ways. Just get clear. What are you doing in each of those areas? Just no judgment, just brainstorm. That's what the playbook leads you through. And then you can start to get confident that, oh gosh, you know what? That does fill me up. Or this is legacy. This is kind of a drag for me. And orthodoxically, volunteering should be good. But I hate that kind of volunteering.
I don't like it. Yeah.
That's not my 1/8 billionth. Maybe it's someone else's, right? So those ABCs are really important. And then you dive in and you evaluate and repeat, right? And get back to awareness. And so it's an ongoing lifelong process, but that's kind of the journey that the playbook takes folks through.
I like that. I like the sort of idea of investing, right? Where we're choosing to invest in all those ways. And I think when I think about that, and it kind of comes back to intentionality, right? It's this idea of being very purposeful with where we invest our time, our energy, our money, anything. And what do we want from those investments? It's almost like the money piece is almost the easiest one sometimes. It's like, I want to invest it in places that are going to do some combination of make me more money and maybe support certain things that I believe in. But a lot of the others, the way we ultimately invest our time and energy, I don't know that we really map that very well onto the thing I want. Even if I've noticed this myself, sometimes I'm like, I'm pretty clear on the thing I want. And then I look back at a week and I go, how much of that really was like pointing towards that thing I want? And others of it were sort of inertia based, like me just kind of like doing the thing I'm comfortable doing rather than being really pointed and going, okay, I want to spend 4 hours doing this thing that will result in something that's going to point me towards that thing. So when you work with people and you frame it in this way, does it one, create a little aha moment where people realize, oh my gosh, I've maybe not been investing? And then how easy do you find people can transition into being much more purposeful with those investments?
Yeah, great questions. And yes, the ahas are plentiful and so satisfying and fun, right? And the favorite aha for me watching people go through this is I am having an impact. I am already making a difference. And it's not to let anyone off the hook or whitewash or greenwash or rainbow wash or any kind of wash.
Right.
But in this moment of damage, it's comforting, like a warm hug to ourselves first, which is motivating and replenishing, refueling to then do more, right? Or to do less of what doesn't work and to do more of what works and what energizes us, right? So you get these win-win-wins. And so that's my favorite aha, rather than like, shoot, I'm not composting. I really could. I'll write the check. I'll start doing that. You know what I mean? Like, okay, maybe that happens and you add something. But, I talk about, and there's a sneak preview probably of a future book or talk, of joyful evolution, right? So that's why it's the playbook is like, look, this stuff is nasty. We're talking about misogyny. We're talking about the wage gap. We're talking about racism. We're talking about political violence. We're talking about murdering infants. Like, it's really ugly.
Yeah.
And there's a moment to honor that and to mourn and to grieve and to be outraged at where leaders have gotten us and what choices people are making. 1,000%. Right? This is not about toxic positivity. And I am a student of psychology and motivation, and that doesn't get us to where we need to be in terms of action. It can be a catalyst, but it's not a sustainable motivator.
Yeah, it's like it's more like a start that then you
it can be a spark, it can be something, but then you need to build momentum, right? And so habits build on tiny habits, right? What are the micro habits that build? And so that aha of like, oh, I do take the time to build my kids a lunch that's relatively locally sourced and balanced and doesn't, and maybe bought from a small business that I love to use their whatevers. And that's really cool. That's a good thing. Now, could I teach them to make it themselves, to save myself time and to help them build habits? Yes, great. Okay. There's the next step, right? But that's the favorite. That's the first round of ahas that I really like to focus on. And then the next is cutting stuff out, right? Another whole talk is to build a to don't list, right? That's what I'm talking about next week is build it. What is your to don't list? Because it just doesn't move. It is not an investment with good return. It is not aligned with that outcome that you want from your investment of energy.
Yeah, I love that idea of a to don't list. And I think we could all benefit from it because I think we often go down paths that feel like they might be useful, but if you really look at them, they're maybe not. And, whether that's stuff trying to tackle some of these big, hairy, ugly issues in the world, it's like, what can I do that is this useful, energizing slice that I can keep doing? And then maybe over time, I can bring in more to it, but let me take on what I can take on right now. That feels like it sort of gives you permission to do that. And it gives you the energy and efficiency to do that when you're taking, this thing maybe felt like it was helping, but it's not. Okay. Yeah. I have permission to put it aside and focus on something that's going to be more useful for whatever my purpose is or my evolving purpose is becoming.
Correct. And I think, just a teeny preview of backstory. We don't have to get into the whole thing. It's out there if people want it. But, very briefly, I had a decade of direct service nonprofit work, right? Which was purportedly totally aligned with the purpose that I knew was mine at 12 years old, right? So I spent 10 years doing that. And then slowly, and then all at once, I was in a bad way. I was totally misaligned, and that was really nasty. I missed my dad's funeral, right? Just to put a big cap on it.
Yeah. Wow.
And so another decade, I built a company and okay, here is where I'm uniquely positioned to be. Here's my slice. And it was amazing and impacted lives and learned. And out of that came the book and the framework. And then slowly, and all of a sudden, it was not my place to be a CEO and spending my energy in that way, right? And so here I am now thinking and writing and talking and coaching and feels amazing. But I'm not an idiot. I think there's a chance that 8.5 years from now, as the next decade dawns,
something's going to show up.
It may misalign and re-evolve, right? So again, it's not right or wrong. It's not a one and done. But at any given moment, you need to be doing those ABCs of getting aware, believing, and then getting really clear and confident and courageous about what is true now.
Yeah.
But then keep getting the awareness because it might not be true tomorrow or next quarter or next decade. And so that's the important work of the journey.
That's really interesting work, especially as you related it to your own story, because there's a couple things that showed up for me. There's the notion of purpose, there's sort of two levels to it. There's the, how am I applying it? Meaning I'm working for a nonprofit for 10 years, but I feel like there's something underneath that. This is something I've tried to get to through certain assessments and other things, but what is at the core driving the desire to create social change or to now work with people as a coach? Is there some internal want, need, whatever fire that just constantly needs or over time needs new space to kind of show up? And I think that's something that's maybe just worth exploring for people is your purpose right now may be something, some project, but is there something in your core about who you are that tends to push you towards that kind of a project, and then it shows up differently? Have you kind of explored that at all to think okay, over time I've moved around a little bit in terms of how I'm focusing my purpose? Do you get a sense of what undergirds all of that? What are the motivators underneath all that?
So for me, and again, it is not one size fits all. For me, the kind of big picture, the fire revealed itself when I was 12. And I switched school districts from an underfunded inner city district to a well-funded suburban one because we moved 400 yards over the town line. And so from sixth grade to seventh grade, opportunity diverged. I saw my friends go that way. I became a person going this way and met friends. And I was like, that's suboptimal in my nerdy 12-year-old precocious language. This doesn't make sense. And it wasn't like boo-hoo, pity party, poor them, lucky us. It was just like, if we have all these big problems and say we want a, prosperous, shared, healthy economy, this is not ideal because I know those kids and they're equally great and dumb and mischievous and smart and creative as these kids. And yet they're not being nourished. Right. And so for me, that kind of equal distribution of opportunity for shared thriving was really clear really early. And now I've spent 30 years banging around the world figuring out what to do about it, right? I think for other people, it is more emergent, right? And so they didn't necessarily, a lot of people have a similar story, right? I was 10 and I this, or I was born knowing this, or I, whatever it might be. I think for other people, particularly or often in a more linear corporate context, I definitely have clients who are like, I don't know. I didn't have that realization when I was 12. Like life has been good. And so that's where some of the work we do in purpose discovery can be really awesome to get at that fire of like, look, when you talk about the book you wrote for your mom's 40th birthday and the way you raise your kids and the extracurriculars you did in middle school and what you sign up for at work and how you're thinking about your philanthropic donations, there's a total red thread here. Right. And so let's hold that up. But so I think that piece, is there for everyone. We've all got a fire. For better or worse, it's been dampened out of a lot of us by our school system, by our workplace, by society, by social media, right? All those things. And so to your point, I love you said permission a few times, which is a huge word. The words that fell out of my book subtitle were an invitation, your invitation to find purpose and inspire. And so publisher thought it was too many words. And so we took those out, but that is very much the spirit with which I work is that it is an invitation to explore this again, because it's going to make you perform better, not because I think you want a ticket to heaven or because you're a coastal elite drinking green juice. It's just a driver of performance.
Yeah. And I think that becomes obvious once you start exploring and start seeing it. It becomes obvious for yourself. And I think, one of the reasons why I think it can be so beneficial to do the kind of work you're talking about and some of what I do as a coach with, executive leaders is if they can see it in themselves, you're sort of, there's a quote unquote conversion process that happens like, oh, wow, I like my job better. Yeah, it'd be great if my team did that. I'm doing better at my job. I'm a better CEO today than I was 6 months ago because I found that fire where I'm nourishing it more. I'm putting more intention towards the things that fuel it. I want my team to have what I have. And
that's that clarity to confidence to courage piece that's transformational for a leader to have. Right. Because again, and the awareness, right? Just square one of work can be healing. We do all have the power to make the world a better place, whether we're investment bankers or CPG marketers or restaurant owners or kindergarten teachers.
Right.
It's all part of the system. There's 1/8 billionth to go around.
Yeah.
And so having the clarity of how that happens, I think usually the leaders I work with have an intuition about that or obviously or we wouldn't be talking.
Right.
But to get really clear about it is what provides the confidence to courageously say, y'all, we're doing a thing here by supporting small businesses as American Express's small business division.
Right.
We're not just hawking credit cards and charging high interest fees. Like maybe there's some parts of our business that could be improved and we're not perfect. And, I'm not trying to bury my head in the sand, but small business drives the economy. Right. And small businesses need credit and we are making that happen.
Yeah.
So,
that's a great example, I think, of because people can feel like I'm in some giant system, organization, industry, whatever. And so when you bring it down to your 1/8 billionth and you go, okay, we could create this small business, thing for MX. We could, I've got a friend who works in marketing, and he was on the show recently, and he created something that he's calling the Marketing Accountability Council. He's basically like, I don't like the way we're currently doing marketing. I don't believe in all of it. I know I can't just flip a switch and change it, but I can do something and bring some others into it. And I think that idea that like whatever sphere we're in, we can make that piece of it better. And like, that's enough. And like, yeah, maybe you can grow and do more once you've done that, but like giving yourself again, that permission, taking that invitation to say, yeah, I work in advertising. How can I make it better? My belief is if we make advertising agencies better places to work, all of the things will start to be better. So that's become kind of my mantra. But like that starts by going to one agency and going, let's figure some things out. Like I don't have to take on the whole thing at once. So I think you make it very there's the sort of beauty of the big purpose then brought down to the very applicable, like, here's what I can do. Again, that shows up in your playbook. That shows up in, another thing that you talk about that I want to touch on. I think you call it the impact dashboard. And I just thought that was really fascinating. The way it was described is it's a way of like looking at your day-to-day actions and seeing how they're connecting to the outcomes we say we want. What a beautiful, simple thing. How does that work, and how are people responding to it?
Yeah. So again, it's kind of when in our lives we invest our time, attention, energy, money. And so that's holistic, myself, family and friends, and then externally, my job, my workplace, my community, and my money. And then it's where in the economy I'm doing that. And so that piece came because I started a nonprofit, because to have impact, that's what you did in the late 90s. That was the path in my head, right? Now, obviously, so now I see there's a spectrum of impact, and whether you're making policy or working at a federal agency, or whether you're in a nonprofit, right, doing that kind of private but for good work, or the benefit economy, right, the B Corps, the conscious capitalism businesses that are for profit, for purpose, or the traditional for-profit sector, which is the bulk of our economy. In any of those places, you can have impact. And so now you overlay those things, right? And now you say, okay, I work in traditional corporate. I'm going to be the guy in the advertising agency that tweaks things a bit, that sets the model, that creates an industry group of how to do advertising better. Great. That's in the traditional. Great. And in my money sphere, I'm going to donate to candidates that I really care about for whatever reason, apolitical, but whatever those are, I'm going to donate to the National Parks Foundation, which supports the federal agency, right? So that's nonprofit, public sector hybrid. In my community, I'm going to be on a board, right? I'm going to donate my advertising savvy to a nonprofit that I care about to get their word out more effectively, like the private sector would, and do that pro bono. So it's just clarity of, in this morass of complicated economy and context and problems, what am I energized by doing? And if you're energized by writing letters for the campaign, great. If you're not, and you can write a check. Great. Like, no shame, right? We need all of those things to happen. So take your piece and do that. Don't do the thing that saps you of energy, because then you have no energy for what we need you doing.
Exactly. That's all those shoulds really coming back into play, right?
Those shoulds coming back.
Yeah.
And then the third dimension, if we can pull it in, I know you and I jammed on this a little bit, is, so it's okay, when in my life, work, life, money, whatever, where in the world, and then how energetically is the data from the GC index, right? This assessment that tells us what our natural energy is. And so now you've got this really cool 3-dimensional model of, okay, I'm going to have a job in the corporate traditional sector. But now I get my GC index data, which again is not about what we're good at or bad at and not about our personality, but it's how we contribute in team most energetically. And so I know that I've really dominant game changer energy with about vision and new ideas. That marketing council is an awesome way for me to spend my time, right? Because I can vision it, I see it so clearly, and spending an extra hour on that at the end of a busy day of client work is actually going to be active recovery and fuel my tank in a way, right? Whereas if I'm an implementer and I'm energized by like the to-dos, pragmatic action, getting tasks done, I shouldn't agree to partner with my friend on starting that thing. I may want to offer to say, hey, when you've got a plan and you need 20 people to be phone called to invite them to come, or you need a research done on who those people might be, or, send it my way, because I'll spend an hour implementing those things at the end of the day and feel more filled up. Right. So I think that GC index has been an amazing addition to the work in the last few years that I've been using it, because it helps get even more specific, right? Because even if you're clear, okay, I'm in the community sphere, I want to contribute in the public sector part of the spectrum. But there's still a lot of options.
How do I show up? And that idea of energy and what energizes us and what saps our energy. Again, I think it gives you a little bit of permission to resist those shoulds, right? Because if I know, I think for me, like the ideation, I don't remember the game changer, thing, was off the charts for me. That was my big one. I think I had a 9 on that. And I wasn't super low anywhere else, but like, it was clear that like, I love living in the world of ideas. And that's a big part of what drew me to advertising. It's why the way I'm framing my stuff around advertising and dreaming big about, creating better places to work. But I do occasionally maybe need some help when I think about, okay, I want to implement this thing through whether I'm creating a community, whether I'm going to do some group work, whatever it is, or even going out and speaking. How the heck do I do that? I know what I want to say, but how do I do it? I know there's people I need to reach out who have much more energy drawn from those areas of implementation and helping shepherd projects along and building upon stuff. It's like, oh, that's a cool idea, but what if, and what if this? So I think it's a really neat tool. And I love that it allows us to say like, that's just not me. I'm not energized by that. So I'm providing more service when I'm living in my spheres of energy, more so than those areas that drain me. And there's other people who are great at that. So why don't we?
I'm energized by it.
Yeah.
So it's a gift.
So let's
delegation
do that. Take that.
done empathetically and with data, ideally, delegation becomes a gift.
Exactly. I think as leaders, to have that kind of insight about your team, knowing, what energizes them. And then there's other tools, obviously, to know kind of how they show up behaviorally, how they, what skills they have. Like all of that information can be useful. So you're delegating the right stuff to the right people, as opposed to just going, well, Susie's up. Yeah, but Susie's going to hate that and probably not do a very good job at it. But if you give Susie the other thing, so it just allows you to be more informed and that's why I think, of course, it leads to more productivity, more profit, more all the things that CEOs and executives are worried about every night. The alignment there makes a lot of sense.
Totally.
As we close up here, there's a few things I want to touch on, and I think we've sort of touched on a bunch of things that relates to this next question, but I'd love to kind of figure out how we can weave it into a thought here. I always ask if you could wave a magic wand and create sort of a fully desuckified workspace in the work world. And, we're at a 4.2 alarm right now. So we're talking some big work. What would that wand do?
It would create immediate and full awareness among us all that from right where we sit, we can have world-changing impact.
Yeah.
And so that's the flip side, the silver lining to that 4.2 is that nothing about everything that got us to that 4.2 could set us up for a 4.2 hurrah year about work. It's just that we haven't chosen to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I really believe that the choice to do that is, again, that low-hanging fruit. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually pretty basic. I'll send also for show notes a McKinsey research that just came out
Cool.
of what employees want versus what employers think employees want. And
Mm.
the biggest red flag headline, good news bomb is people just want to belong.
Yeah.
They just want to feel human. And look, just want to belong. I understand that the workplace is fraught and that it's tough. And I want to insist that there are some very simple, no cost, no skills development training needed human things that we can do that would flip that switch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sort of overnight, with a lot of work to be done.
Of course. Yeah.
Beyond that. I
love that though, because I think, again, there's these sort of big picture shoulds and expectations and all that stuff that we're paying attention to that make it feel like we can't do some of those things. And if we can allow ourselves to realize that we can have an impact, that's a really wonderful thing. All of us. Yeah. I am a big fan of that approach. And I definitely look forward to seeing that research, because I think that feels like that is a green shoot of possibility if we recognize that. So the last thing I would like to ask, and I ask everybody because I use sound effects in my show. I'm a big cat person, so you'll hear like cats meowing and hissing and doing all goofy stuff in the intro to every show. But every guest has mostly offered some kind of sound effect to add to our library, and it'll show up in our episode. So do you have a desuckified sound effect that you can share with us?
Woo! That's what it would sound like going to work on a desuckified workplace.
I like that. Can we do that one more time?
Woohoo!
Awesome. Nice. I like to have it nice and clean so I can get it into the show. And I agree. I think it's not that we expect work world or any part of our world to be just, like you said, sort of just like fully awesome at all times, but there is so much we can do to create positive change from any position we're in. And, you get that, even that small change should hopefully, give you a chance to have the woohoo come out a little bit, and then give us our permission to celebrate more, right? Like when we do make even a small change that improves, like, let's celebrate. Let's have a little fun with it. Let's laugh. Let's just enjoy those moments of even tiny incremental movement, because that's how the change ultimately happens. It's rarely those giant swings that we hit,
Totally. No, exactly right.
Thank you. Thank you, Nell. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I'll give one last thing. I'd love to just give you a chance to, how do people connect with you? You're doing lots of amazing stuff out there. The book, you got all this other stuff. What are the best ways for people to find you and learn more about what you're doing?
Totally. So nelldd.com is my homepage, and there's really easy way to kind of sign up and be on the inner circle of all of the more personal in evolution content and writing and thinking, like my, the thesis I shared today about where we're at. And then LinkedIn for sure, I'm easy to find there, and absolutely invite people to connect there. That has, more of the public announcements about events where I'm speaking or hosting, some really cool stuff coming for the fall, kind of the next level of engagement with my book. A new book coming out that I co-authored, but all still about conscious leadership in September. And then some online play we'll be doing in community if people are interested in that, starting in the fall. So again, really just going first and the playbook kind of to the next level to really engage people at any level, and whether that's kind of a deep and expensive and timely, corporate engagement, that's absolutely part of my world.
Of course.
But also in a, pay what you can, free to play, join, come community level. So all of that is out there. Yeah.
I love that, Nell. I think you are putting a lot of good stuff into the world, and I appreciate it. And I think the more people hear about it, the more people will appreciate it. And that's you're doing your 1/8 billionth and then maybe a little more on top.
All we can.
Yeah,
Likewise, TJ, the Desuckify work, as I told you when we first connected a bit ago, is just brilliant. It's spot on. It's just what we need to do. And really, the 4.2 is really bad and really loud and costing a lot of people a lot.
it is.
So, and when we flip it, it is magic. And we've got everything we need to make magic.
I agree with that. Well, I look forward to continuing to create some momentum in that space. And once again, thanks for coming on the show, Nell.
Thank you. Total pleasure, TJ. Keep it up.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, share, rate, review, subscribe, or consider launching a cat-shaped rocket that spells out Desuckify your face with its butt exhaust as it burns through the stratosphere. A huge thanks to Nell for bringing energy, insight, and a clear path forward for living and working with purpose to the show. You can follow Nell on LinkedIn and check out her site at nelldd.com, where you can download a free to-don't list and subscribe to her Inner Circle newsletter. You should also check out her book, Going First: Find the Courage to Lead Purposefully and Inspire Action, along with the accompanying Purpose Party Playbook. Speaking of parties, my site and my Substack newsletter are the place to be on a Saturday night, or anytime really. And if you'd like to go really wild, let's set up a free half-hour Desuckify discovery session. Bye, everyone.